Welcome to Maynard Solutions Connect Symposium. Thank you for attending today's session on visualizing your D365 Business Central data in Power BI. My name is Justin Klein and I will be the moderator, and your presenter today is Tom Jablonski. He is the lead of our D365 Business Central practice. We also have Nick Connolly on as a panelist. With that, I will hand over the reins to Tom Jablonski. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our symposium. Today, we're going to talk about Power BI, how to basically take a look at your D365 data within Power BI and see what a powerful tool it can be for you. Please bear in mind that while we're talking about D365 today, I know that there's a couple users that aren't currently on D365. This could be really any system, any database, any file that can be used to bring it in. And we will actually showcase that a little bit as we start to go through the process. So as we walk through here, so what is Power BI? Well, it's just basically a collection of services, apps, and things. You can read this, but basically what it is it allows you to access just about any system outside of Power BI and bring the data together. So let's say that you use a CRM package along with an ERP and you want that data brought together for some nice reporting, as you could see here on the screen. You would basically connect to both of those data sets and bring this into Power BI, and then start to create linkages between those tables and then start to do your visualizations from there. So it is truly meant to be a simple, easy process for you to kind of go through this stuff, connect to your data, and then bring out really cool looking visualizations of that. So what are the parts of Power BI? Well, there's a desktop, which is what we're going to spend most of our time in today. If you wanted to share out the data that you've created in your Power BI, you can publish it up to the service. And then additionally, there is a way for you to go out there and create a mobile view of the same information that you could then open up on your phone. Back to this. So if we're staying focused on the desktop, that's a free thing that you can use. And even parts of the service, if that's just you publishing it yourself and consuming it yourself, where there does become, just to be fully transparent with you all, there is a fee for the Power BI service if you're going to start sharing out your data. So let's say that I created these cool visualizations that you see on the screen and I push it out to the service, and I want my management team to be able to click on all of the same stuff and have the same user experience that I do as I go through these reports. Then they would be charged the service fee. It's $10 per user per month for the service if we were going to share out the data. But if it's just me presenting this and creating it and then basically getting it out to other users, I don't have to pay anything to be able to take advantage of this and get reports created in the system here. Okay, so we are going to begin with going through the Power BI desktop. And then we'll show you how to go out and publish it out to the share service. And then basically this is just kind of walking you through the things I just described. And then here are some of the building blocks, right? Is you can build your dashboards, you can build your reports, but you're going to base it off of either workbooks or data sets coming out of some sort of reporting engine, such as your SQL Server, or in our case, D365. And then, so the Power BI desktop, there are monthly releases that come out against that. So these are just things that will get automatically brought into your desktop. Microsoft pushes those out, like it says here, on a monthly basis. The service, it gets updated weekly. It's just trying to continually bring out new enhancements, get you new features out there. Quite honestly, it went from being almost daily when it first came out to now being weekly and monthly. So it is a good thing. It's pretty seamless for you folks. You wouldn't even know it most of the time. And then if you're going to download the Power BI app, you definitely want to do it from the store. You can go out to downloads for Microsoft.com and get it there. But I ran into this, so I did it in both spots. And it definitely functions better when you download it from the Microsoft store. So that's been the thing to know, is to just go search out Power BI in there, find the Power BI desktop, and then launch it from there. So that's pretty much it for my slides. However, if you go through and download the slides, what I started to do was to try and capture some of the screens that we're about to go through, because there's nothing worse than coming in and seeing a demo slide and then not being able to get through and see what you guys covered in the demo. So I tend to do this when we have these conferences, is to try and screenshot some of this so it can trigger a memory for you to remember how to go in there and do some of the things that we went through. So I am going to leave my PowerPoint at this point. For those of you that love PowerPoints, I'm sorry, mine are generally short and sweet other than the screenshotting. And then I am going to go ahead and jump over to, actually, I'm going to jump into D365 Business Central really briefly here for a second, because there's a couple of things that you need to understand before you want to go in there and start doing stuff outside of D365 in terms of data. So there's two spots that you would want to kind of take a quick look at. The first one is going to be users. And yes, pretty much every user in D365 can get to users. And the main reason for it is this. Here's all of our users within our demo environment. When I click on my name down here, if you don't see this web key already populated in here, then what you'd want to do is there's either to generate the web key or change the web service key, but you would need to basically get D365 to generate this key for you, because at some point it's going to ask you to log in, and what you're going to do is use your ID, but then you're going to use this web service key as your password. That's what's going to then know that I am officially T. Jablonski in this environment, and know what rights I have in terms of all of my user permissions and everything else, so that it knows what areas of D365 I'm allowed to access. And that way, all of your data is still being sheltered if people aren't supposed to get into certain areas of your D365. So even though we're going to be functioning outside of it, it's this web services key that helps make sure that all that data integrity is still being taken care of there. So that's one spot. The second spot is called web services. And what this does for us is, this is what exposes a lot of the stuff. D365 is actually sitting in Mainer's cloud, or in Microsoft's cloud, up in the Azure SQL database system up there. So as I was saying earlier, you can access data in anything, right? SQL Server, whatever. But because we're in a multi-tenanted service environment for Microsoft, if we had direct access to the SQL Server, we'd see other customers' data out there. So this web services allows us to gain access to our companies, and this is pushing out all the different objects that we could access to go out there and start to pull out data. This would be the equivalent of, I know there's a couple of GP users out here today, these would be the equivalent of your GP tables sitting in the database on your local server. And the idea behind it would be is, a lot of this is in English language here, so we know what we're looking at. But the other point would be is, if there's something out here that you wanted to go right against and you didn't see it, you can actually create a brand spanking new one of these by clicking on the new button. And I'm going to go in and set this up as a query. And I know that the object ID, I was playing with somebody earlier today, is 6420. Uh-oh, it's not showing up right. Hang on, I grabbed the wrong one. But the idea would be is these object IDs are tied to specific screens within the system. And all it takes is for you to call out the right one. I apologize. There's another one I think I can do at 132. And this is a sales one. But the idea would be is, as you do it, you can put in a value for the object name, the service name, and then you can tell it that you want to publish this. And then that object will get pushed out that we can then access. And so what you're going to see is a bunch of this stuff will start to show up when we go into Power BI, and you're going to see a lot of names that you're seeing right here. I'm going to go out and delete this right here. So if you're looking to connect up to data and you don't see it, then obviously you'd want to reach out to Nick or I, and we can help you through this and kind of bring you up to speed on what you'd want to do to try and, I had the numbers wrong. I said 6420, it's 2460. So, but that's what you would want to do to go out there and grab some of these things and get it published out there for you to go to have access to it. In your SQL Server, it would be a connection to the SQL Server and the tables. If you already knew how to do some of that stuff, you would just be looking for the appropriate table names. Okay, we're done with D365. We can go ahead and reduce that. And now I'm going to jump into Power BI. So what I wanted to showcase for you folks today is I created some really simple dashboards in here, right? This is surfacing out some customer information, showing total sales year to date, putting it onto a map to kind of show us where we have activity, and then giving us some information by customer and then even by salesperson, okay? Then over here, I started to break out looking at my line item information. I'm looking at my costs and my profit or my line sales amounts and comparing those to be able to sit there and look at the margin that I'm getting out here. And again, I'm just surfacing out some details. And then I just basically created a really simple report over here. So we're going to replicate these 3 pages, hopefully in the next 45 minutes or so. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go click new. Okay, so where we start all of this, if you're coming in for the very first time, this is what the screen would look like, right? And you got to make sure that you're signed in. I should have already been signed in. I'm not sure why it's not showing up that way, but I want to go out here and I want to go get data. So what I'm going to do is click into here. And then it's going to ask me, where do I want to get this data from? So as you can see, I can get it from a file source. It could have been an Excel file. It could be a text file. It could be anywhere. It could be SQL Server, right? So if I came into here and I'm starting to see all these different SQL servers that I could get into and Oracle servers and things like that. We're here talking about D365, so it's going to be in online services, okay? And so here it is, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central is what we're going to click on. And then I'm going to tell it that I want to connect. So this is showing me my production environments, and what you're going to see is a whole bunch of companies that we have created out here as our demo environments. And so here's all the companies that I could go out here and start writing Power BI stuff against. I'm going to use this little triangle next to it for the TWJ demo. And now what I'm starting to see is everything that was out there listed in those web services, these are basically the tables that I can come into really easily and start to grab to say, I want to go do something against this. So I'm going to select 3 things out of here to go out there and replicate what I just showed you in my other Power BI session here. So I'm going to grab the customer card. We're going to go down to the posted sales invoices and the posted sales invoice lines. Oops, too far. So I want to bring out posted sales invoices and posted sales invoice lines. Notice there's another one. Somebody was playing in our environment and they created one from scratch in that web services in D365. So that's why there's 2 of these, but I know that this is the one that I wanted to play with. As I click on each of these, it's actually giving me a snapshot of what this table looks like. And it lets me kind of scroll across and see what it looks like. If I wanted to click on the posted sales invoices, that's what this one looks like. Far less columns to play with. Now that you've created or selected the tables that you wanted to be able to work with, you have 2 choices. One is you can either click load or you could click transform data. If you know, like this one's pretty short, sweet, and simple, this posted sales invoices, and if that's the only one I wanted to play with, I'd probably just go right in and click the load button right now. But I do know that there's a bunch of columns that I don't need inside of this sales invoice line one. And so what I want to do first is I actually want to go into transform data. And what this is going to do is bring up our Power Query editor. And it now brings in each of the tables that we just brought in. And all I wanted you to see here is a couple of things. Number one is, as you start to see that we've got a bunch of blank columns, right? I can quickly and easily come through here and start to clean this data up so that I don't have to have all of these blank columns coming into my data set as I want to start working with my visualizations. So there's a couple ways that I can do stuff with this. I can either come over to here on the bar at the top here and click the remove columns and it'll do it, or I can come down to here and all I'm going to do is scroll over for a bit. Let's see, there's only the 2 of these, but just like anywhere else, I can use the shift or I can use the control to grab multiple columns and start to remove columns. Okay, so you definitely want to come in here and do this to clean things up. The other thing that you can do, let's see if we can grab a bunch of this stuff because we don't need any of it. Okay, so I just removed a whole bunch of columns, try and get the stuff cleaned up, but I want to add a couple of columns because I do know in here that I want to be able to get into some line item profitability. So what I'm going to do now is I want to actually come in and I want to insert a column. So if I just came over to here, I am going to go in here and actually click this to bring in my data source because I actually came back and did this a different way before. So what I'm going to do is do close and apply. This is what's now going to take us into our Power BI desktop here. So this allows me to do some cleanup. The other thing I forgot to mention is I can actually change the data type in here. So if something was set up as a wrong data type and it was not set up as a decimal or I wanted it to just be a number, I can actually change this by clicking right there and I can change it to one of the other data types that I needed to. So that's the other cleanup that you can do in here. But I'm gonna go ahead and do close and apply. This will take a second to bring all this data in. And now this is my Power BI desktop and you'll see our data sources appearing in the field section over here. Okay, so there's our data sources. Before I get started with it, I want to go in and relate all of my tables together. So what I'm going to do is, this is my visualization pane. These are my data panes that allow me to look at each of these things, just like we were looking at in the transform. And then right here is the relationship screen where we can go out here and start to relate all of these tables together. I will tell you, it is kind of a quirk within the D365 environment. So what you're going to notice here is the posted sales header information. And in here, it just says number. If I also come down here in the card section for the customer, you'll notice that it generically calls these number as well. So it is a quirk out here that it does not say that this is the customer number here, that this is the invoice number here. It is just something that you'll have to get used to. And then ironically, right, so it's number here, but in the sales line, it's actually doc number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to relate my posted sales invoice to my posted sales lines so that now I've created a relationship between these two things. And as I start to model my data, it knows how to do it. This all sounds really, really hard, but it's not. It's actually relatively easy. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to be able to relate my sales transactions to my customers. And so in here, I'm going to actually take this customer card and I'm going to relate it all the way over here to the bill to customer number. Okay. And then what these numbers are representing is there's one customer that exists in the data. So this is a 1 here. But there could be multiple invoices for that customer. So this is a one-to-many relationship. Same thing happens here. There's one sales header, but there could be multiple lines on it. And so that's what all of this stuff represents as you're looking at it. It seems somewhat complex, but it's really not. And then you can actually drag these things around. If you really wanted to see how these things are connected a little more logically, you can actually move this stuff around to kind of look at that. Okay, so we've connected all of our tables. And now we're going to go into the visualization section of this stuff, okay? And remember, on my first time in here, when I showed you my Power BI over here, I had 3 pages. So we could start right now and just start to add the additional pages if that's what I wanted to do, because I know that I want this to be 3 pages long, or I could just build them out as I saw fit and then start to move things around. This functions a lot like Excel, where I can take these things and move them just like you can move sheets on Excel. So it should give you kind of a good look and feel as you're kind of playing around with this stuff in here. And then let's see here. Here's my sales. Let me move this over a little bit. Here's my sales invoice lines. So remember, I wanted to add in a couple of columns. What I want to do now is click over to here. And from within here, I want to click on the new column. So this is what I was trying to show you earlier. There it goes. So in here, I want to create a brand new column, and I want this to be called sales line amount. And it stopped typing there for me. Sorry, hang on, let's try that again. Sales line amount. So this becomes the name of my column. Oh, I guess I did that one lowercase. Is equal to, And now I'm just going to start typing in. What I want is the quantity from my lines. So I want to be down here in my posted sales invoice line. Now I want to be able to say that I want a new column. It's going to be equal to, and then I'm just going to start typing in quantity. And it's still not coming up the way I needed it. So why are you not showing up here? Because again, that's why. There we go. New column, 1/3 times the charm. Apologies. This was supposed to look easier than I just made it, so there we go, is equal to quantity. There we go. I'm good. All I'm trying to do is type in that I wanted the quantity, and it can go out to my data source and find the posted sales line information. So I don't have to type all of that. So I'm just going to grab that. And then on the end of this, I'm going to add an asterisk for the multiply. And then I'm going to put in that I want the sales and then find my sales amount. Unit price right here. So I'm going to bring that in. Okay. So now sales line amount just got defined as my quantity times my posted sales unit price. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on that. We're going to add in one other new column here. And I'm going to do the same thing for the cost. So we're going to do sales cost. And then unit cost. And hit enter. So I just added 2 brand new fields that did not exist in this data set. And they got included into here. When you saw that working on it, it was actually adding those 2 new items out here. So we're going to use that in a moment on page 2. So now that I've got my data sets the way I wanted it to, I know on page 3 that we were going to call this the details page. So all I'm going to do is right click on page 3 down here and click that I want to rename this, and we're going to call it details. Okay. Then it's a matter of starting to figure out what I wanted to bring out and how I want to bring it out. So I want this to be somewhat report based. So I have all these different visualizations to play with. And so what I'm looking for is a table. So I'm going to go and click on table right here, and it brings up this blank table. And then I'm going to start to drag out the pieces of data that I wanted to drag out here. So as I'm going through this stuff, I can start to bring out into this from my posted sales invoice. Let's see here. Right here, I'm going to bring out the sales invoice number. So just by clicking on this, it's going to add it into my table. Okay, so I've got that. I want to bring out the bill to customer number. And I want to bring out the bill to customer name, because the number, the customer number, I might not be familiar with, but there's the names. Okay, so then I also want to bring in the document date. So if I come out here and I start to bring in the document date right here, what Power BI does, it's actually kind of cool. What you're going to see is this was really just a regular date if we went back to look at the data in the table. But when I click on here that I want to add it, notice I've got a little arrow here. And what it actually starts to do is it breaks out this whole date into its constituent components here. And it lets me go out here and actually evaluate it at all of these different, I got off of my other one when I went to click that. So there's doc date. And you'll notice what it added here was the year, the quarter, the month, and the date. Well, I don't need the quarter, so I'm going to turn that off. And I don't need the day. So I just want my month and my year in there. So I didn't actually do that. Power BI did that for me automatically, because generally speaking, as people are trying to play with data, they want it to be normalized in ways that they can start to do slicing and dicing of information. And so that's essentially what that's going to allow us to do. And then what we also want to be able to then do is go out there and add in the amount, right? And so here, I just want the amount from the sales invoice. And so here we go. If I'm looking at my 2018 data all the way through, I think I got 2019 data in here as well. I have a sum total of all my posted invoices for $675,997. Well, that's great, except that it's showing me from the beginning of time until now. I want to be able to slice and dice this information and to be able to play with it a little bit more. So I'm going to do a couple of things. Number one, I'm actually going to remove this one. So let's remove that. This one right here, I want to drag this down a little bit and kind of move it around over here. So this is my desktop I get to play with, and then I can start to add in additional things around this. And then I wanted to add a slicer because I don't want to look at everything from the beginning of time. I want to be able to slice and dice on my years, on my month, maybe even by my customers. And so what I'm going to do is use another visualization out of here. And that's this one right here that's next to the table. And I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to add in a slicer. And on this slicer, I just want to put in the year. So this one shows me my 3 years that I have contained out here. But I don't really like it with this right here because it's not going to work for me in the way I want the slicer to function. So what I actually want is I just want this to be a list. And then I can shrink this up a little bit and make that be a little bit smaller. Okay. So now what can I do with that slicer? Well, these are pretty darn cool. I just want to click here again and drag here again, drag this down. Come on, work with me. There we go. Wanted to drag this down. All right, so now what does the slicer do for us? As I'm sitting here and looking at my data, well, I wanted to just be able to see 2019 data. So now when I click this, it's keeping all of my data static, right? And it just knows that I'm just interested in 2019. So now all I see is any of the months that related to 2019. And now I'm getting a new total, which says instead of the 675,000, I only did 182,000 in 2019, okay? If I wanna go back to all, I just take out that checkbox and I'm all set, okay? Now I wanna be able to go out there and slice it by the month as well. So again, I can come over to here. I'm gonna click just into a blank region over here and tell it I want another slicer. And this one I'm gonna drag down. I want it to be down here. And what you start to see with these red lines is it's trying to help me align it with the top or the bottom, or in this case with this one. So I'm going to drop it right beneath this one so it looks kind of consistent. And then on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in, make sure it's highlighted, and I'm going to bring in the month. And then what I want to be able to do is present all of the months in here like this, okay? So now, as I'm looking at my data, I can simply come into here and say, oh, show me 2019, and now only show me April. And now I see this is my total for my April sales for 2019. If I were to back out this, now I get to see all of 2019 again. And if I were to back out this, I get to see all my data one more time. So then, last thing to add in would be just one final slicer to go out there and add in that I would like to be able to then do a slicer where I can just see my sales by customer. And so the final one would be to come into here. I'm gonna go up to the customer card and I'm just gonna drag it out by the name. Not what I wanted. Did it again, sorry. Let's try that one more time. There, and then name. There we go. So now, as I'm looking at my customers, I can come into here and say, I would like to look at just a datum. And now all I see is activity for a datum. I want to see what we did with them in 2019. Here's all of 2019. And what did I do for them just in January or February? Let's do February. And so I've only done $20,000 for this customer in 2019 for the month of February. It's all pretty cool. Then the other thing that you can start to do is we could group these things together so that basically I could have a state where all of these are blanked out so that I can come in and select things fresh. And then I could also come in here and have it where I'm going to do stuff where it's not blank, right? So I could set up some defaults in here. So there's lots of different things that you can do. This is a really nice, simple way to start looking at details without getting really tricky about all the rest of the data out here. So now we're going to move into our second visualization that we want to play with, And this one becomes a little bit more graphical. This one becomes a little bit more of a, hey, instead of it being a traditional report grid kind of a look that we've done, I want to be able to look at this in a more visual way, because it starts to mean more to me or my management as they're looking at stuff, because they just want to see the spread on something or the totals of a couple key pieces of data, right? So if I move over into page 2 now, and I'm going to click that I just want to do another visualization out here. So I'm going to start with a stacked bar chart. And in here, I'm going to drag out that I want to bring in those 2 new fields that I added. And so what I want to be able to do is I want to do my sales line amount, which is my my sales amount. I'm going to bring in my line cost amount. I'm sorry, it wasn't a stack bar. I wanted to do my line chart is what I wanted. Okay. Then I want to bring in my month from the sales invoice. Okay. And I want to bring in the year as well. Actually, I don't want to bring it out onto here. I just want this one to be for the months. That's what I want to do. So now I get to look at my total sales for each period. I get to see my cost, and I get to see my revenue, and I can see the kind of margin in between that. Okay. Had I done another calculation, I could have brought in the profit amount and had it kind of show up in the line in between these. But again, it lets me go out here and actually see all this data visually now. But I still want to be able to slice and dice some information, and I maybe want to go out here and actually look at what are my total sales for the year, what are my total costs for this same time frame, right? So we're going to add a couple of other different kinds of visualizations in here. So one of the ones I want to use is this one right here. It's called a card. And I did it again. So this is the fun part, right? And one of my slides will say, play in here. What you're going to find is you'll end up wanting to do something and get ahead of yourself. I forgot to click down into a blank spot. So all I'm using is my undo key up here. So now I want to bring in the card. And in here, I want to be able to bring in what my total sales based on those sales lines. So I'm going to bring in my sales line amount. This is my total revenue that matches up to these, right? And I'm going to shrink this up a little bit. Now we can start to play a little bit with this. So now, if I want this to be not just black and white, there's some color up here, and I'd like this to pop a little bit better. So I can use this little roller right here as the format key. And so this allows me to come in here and actually start to look at data labels and my backgrounds. So in here, I would like a background in here to make this pop out a little bit better. So right now everything's set to white. I want to come in here and I want that to be set to this blue. That'll match that one right there. And so that's what I want to use there. And then I want to come down. I don't want it to be a square like that. I would actually like it to have a rounded corner on the border. So I'm going to turn on the border. I want the border to be black, that's fine, but I want there to have this radius kind of thing done. And so what this is going to do is round out these corners a little bit. And so now if I get off of there, so now I took it and I softened that up a little bit, okay? So then I want to add in that same information or another card, and then I want to bring in my cost information. So on this one, I want this to be my cost. And then essentially, I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to shrink this up a bit. Okay. So again, I'm going to turn on the border. I'm going to set it to black. That's fine. And I'm going to set my radius again. I actually forgot what number I grabbed on the first one. We'll leave that one set to 12 for right now. And then I'm going to go in and change my background color on this. So again, I could use the darker blue to kind of represent it's the same thing, but I don't have to. I could come back into here and say, ooh, I don't really like the way that looks. Let me come back into here, look at my formats again. And rather than that being so dark like that, or let's see here. Let's change this. And maybe I want it to be something more like that. So maybe a little bit nicer to look at that way. And then finally, what I want to be able to do is I do want to add another slicer in here because this is great, but I'm looking at multiple years worth of Januaries, I believe here. And so what I want to be able to do is I want to add in a slicer here. and I want to come back down and I want to bring in a slicer for my years. And again, I just want to kind of leave this set as a list, and that way I can kind of refine what it is that I want to look at and what I want to see here. And so now if I'm looking at this data and I click on 2018, my numbers will change. These numbers are changing in conjunction with it. If I go to 2019, same thing happens. And if I go to 2020, not a whole lot going on. Okay, so again, nice and easy. As you're first looking at these things, it seems like, gosh, how can I get my head wrapped around this? How can I attack this? The biggest thing for me, and I'm going to keep saying this, is come in, start playing around with it. Maybe you don't have to add in a whole bunch of tables. Maybe start with the customer data and play around with it. See if you can get some simple things going. That's the next section we're going to be jumping into. But it doesn't have to be super hard. It doesn't have to be a whole bunch of tables. It could be something simple just to get your head wrapped around it. Play with some of the different visualizations. Because again, once I've done this, I can sit here and start changing visualizations all day long, right? I like that one. Or no, I'd rather look at it like this. So it doesn't hurt for you to sit there. That one didn't work out so well. To go out here and play around with this stuff and just see which version of this you like best, right? So actually, maybe something more like that is even better, right? To kind of really represent the kind of data that we were trying to pass across to people. Okay, so going to keep moving along here, but again, you start to see that you can start to make these things look as pretty as you would like to. So we started out as a very simple, let's make it look like a regular report. I do know we have somebody on here, and it was about sales information, wanting to see it by salesperson as well as other information. So again, this could have been sales information instead of by customer. It could have been salesperson here listed in here, just so we're clear. And then I could have done restrictions down here as to salesperson rather than being customers. We're actually going to play with salesperson a little bit on the next one. I'm not sure that we're going to get it to split up as much as we did here. So I do want to change the name of this screen right here. So I'm just going to rename this. And then this was just sales info. Oh, lost my S. There we go. Okay, so I'm just renaming. Oh, it was there. Now I ended up with 2. Okay, now we're going to move over to page 1. So on this one, I really do primarily stay focused on going in and bringing in just customer data. So I'm just going to close up the posted sales line stuff and the posted invoices, and we're just going to focus on just the customer data up here. So I know one of the things I really wanted to present to you is, hey, if I looked at a map of the US, what would our sales look like, right? So what I can do is I can come into here, and if I can find the right, there it is. Here's the map visualization. So if I click on that, right? So now what I can do is I can come out to here and I can say, I want to bring in the cities of all of my customers, and I want to bring in their total sales. Okay, so now let me make this a little bit bigger. Oops. So a couple things about maps. Number one, I just want to drag it down a little bit. There we go, so you can see it better. Let me make it quite a bit bigger for a second here. So things about maps. As I'm using the scroller on my mouse, I can zoom in to start getting a little more detail, because maybe we're localized right here and there's just too much detail, and suddenly it starts to break out between cities here, right? So I can zoom way in, or I can zoom way out to see, hey, we do have a footprint both in the US and over in Europe, and I want to be able to kind of get both of those captured. So again, I can zoom in and out on the maps to be able to represent my data. Okay, so this is pretty cool, because now you can start to see, hey, we're doing pretty good in these areas, right? This is, you obviously have more sales down in the Georgia area than you do up in Michigan or over in Illinois. but you'll notice as you hover, it actually starts to show you the details of each of these. Okay, so that's one cool thing here. So I'm going to reduce this a little bit, and then we're just going to start to add in some additional information around this stuff. So again, if we came into here and we wanted to start to bring out, I want to click my card again, because what I wanted to bring out here, I didn't want to do it there. All right, do the same thing one more time. There we go. So I've added in the card, and I want to bring in on this. I want to bring in my customer number. And what I wanted to do with this is, rather than this just showing me the first number that it finds, I want to know how many customers I actually have out here. So if I change this over here, I can change it from being the first one that it finds to being just a count. Okay. And so now what this shows me is I have 23 customers in here. Well, count of number doesn't really tell me. So what I want to actually do here as well is I want to rename this. And let's just say number of customers. Okay. And so now that says number of customers. Okay. So now it lets me know how many customers I have that make up this area here. And then I want to be able to go out here and actually do a stacked bar chart. So I'm going to use this one right here. So I'm going to click over here. I'm going to add in another visual just so I can start to bring in some stuff. Now, I've been coming over here, clicking on here. There's a couple of different, there's actually 3 different ways that I can actually add the data elements into these. So I've just been normally clicking in here. This actually got added in one of the later releases. It used to be, right, that you actually had to drag and drop these things. And so you would have to drag it out here and say, oh, I want total sales over there. So this is another way that you can go out here and deal with this, is actually drag them and drop it, or you can just hit the little checkbox. Or you can, excuse me, you'll notice it got added here. So I would be able to drag and drop things into additional values and be able to bring these things in. So there's different ways that you can handle this stuff. But what I want to bring in here is I want to bring in the salesperson code. So now that's going to be my access. Here's my salespeople. And then I'm bringing in my total sales. And then again, so I got that. And then I want to bring in another stacked bar chart down here. Oops. And then I'm going to actually this time do total sales one more time, and I'm going to do it based on total sales. And then this time I want it to be based on the customer number. And I will bring in the name as well. Okay. So now as I look at this, I've brought in all sorts of data. It's got some hideous colors in there, which we can control. And then over here, so basically what I'm looking at is I've created for you a map that shows me my total sales for my customers in their cities, essentially showing me their total sales that I can hover over and see the amounts, right? Based on the city that the customer resides in. I can look at my customers and look at their total sales for a period. And then I could actually start to come out here and do some restrictions, right? Is maybe I want to do a slicer and actually only look at a particular customer. I would be able to do that. I can just simply add in a slicer like what we did before. Coming into here, I did it again. See, I get excited to show this stuff and then I forget to click off. So I could come into here. Oh, it's just covering it. My bad. All right, so I could come into here and add in my customers. And so again, now, you know what? Nobody knows them by their numbers. I want to actually bring it in by name. So now I could come out to here. And in fact, I want to change this too. I don't want it to be by number. I want it to be by name. So let me unmark that. All right, so now all I did real quickly was I took the number off of the access and I put the name into the access area. And so now it shows me my customers in there as the access, and it shows it by name. So again, if I wanted to, I would now be able to just click on this, and now I would only see a datum. And then notice my map changed too. There's only one customer. There's only one salesperson associated with it. We've done this much in revenue, right? It's showing me almost 30,000 when I hover. It tells me it's 28,098, and it shows me again same kind of data over here. So this is a nice, easy way for users to go out there and start to interact with their data and be able to go out there and play with this stuff to really kind of look at your data. So again, reports are fine. There's a reason that we have reports. There's a reason that we have things in very much black and white, because there's calculations going on. There's all sorts of things that need to happen, and we want to look at totals. But then there are times where suddenly a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? As I'm looking at this, I can start to see a trend better here than maybe I could have looking at the exact same data here, okay? And then similarly is, I'm just taking it all the way up and looking at more just customer-driven data and starting to see things differently. And again, when I want to see all my data again, I just take that out, okay? So that takes me into about 10 minutes left within this presentation. I have a few things I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to reduce my Power BI. I forgot one other thing I wanted to introduce early on, and it's kind of like Excel and anything else, right? You kind of want to save often. I've gotten myself tripped up in Excel as well, where I've been working on some ginormous spreadsheet and I forgot to save it. One of the things I did want to mention early on is you do want to save your project early on. You do want to get in there. Once you've done your Power Query and you've brought it into the desktop here, my suggestion and what I was trained to do would be to go out there is to come out here, name it, and hit save, right? Because now the auto save will start to jump in. And so again, if something were to happen and you got all the way through page 3 here, but yet you hadn't saved it yet, you lost power, something happened, the auto save on Power BI will not kick in until you hit the first save. So you definitely want to save early on, and you can certainly save manually by clicking on the save button throughout the time that you're working on it. Maybe as you finish each of your pages, you want to go out there and hit save just in case you do something silly. And then the final piece to go out there and share this would be to click the publish button, and then you could go out into your Power BI service and actually bring all of these that we've just published. If once I click the button, you'd be able to go out into the service and you would see all the exact same visualizations that we just created here that you could consume out there, okay? Finally is, I wanted to go and reduce this for a second because I wanted you to start thinking about your data outside the box. And so I have a couple of examples that I wanted to highlight here. So on our slicers, this is technically a slicer that somebody did a really cool visual against the slicer. Right now, this is focused on March 13th. That's what this is showing you. But if I were to drag this one over, this is not a live Power BI, just so we're clear. I'm just giving you a snapshot of it. But if I were to drag this, this would highlight all 4 of these dates. And now I'd be looking at data down here for the 10th through the 13th. Or I could use this slider over here for the slicer. And instead of looking at day, I could be looking at months. And now what I'd be presented with would be all my months. And again, I'd have a slider here that I could choose January through December, or just look at January, and all this data was going to change, okay? So I could change from day to month to year, another way to use your slicers, okay? We also have, within this environment, we broke up that there's 2 different types of sales orders that were being used. And so there's an ML type and there's a PC type. And we wanted to be able to look at them individually. And so this one's showing us, there's another poll going on. So I'm going to let you do that for a second. I can keep talking through this though. So this is going to show us our period to date information, as well as just this data between these 2 different data types. And so if I were to click on the ML, then I would have only seen data down here for the ML type, and then not seen the PC ones included in there as well, okay? And all of this data would have been refreshed just by clicking on those different slicers. So that's one cool kind of a report that we've worked on for our customer. And then out here is, I just went online to just start looking at different things that people have done in Power BI, because again, I want you to start thinking about it. But note, here's an income statement overview that's really kind of breaking out a lot of detail. And it really lets you visually look at your income statement information in a really cool way. And then as I scroll down, Here's your inventory aging that could be done out there, right? By looking at your inventory module rather than looking at customer information or sales information. Now we're looking at aging information where it's tracking all sorts of really cool stuff. And this has reports and graphs all built into it. And then down here, you've got quality performances, right? And so this is talking about it from a manufacturing perspective. And maybe you've got some scrap that's going on and defect rates and things like this. It's literally just data being mined out of the database and being presented to you in a different way. This is simply just using one of those cards that we did, summing up data. And then these things are just different visualizations as we saw. The map, the graph, or these are simple just changes between it. And then it's just about the data that's trying to drop out there. Okay, and then you can do some labor and capacity. So this is based on work centers or machine centers within the system. So what are my total hours that I have capable, or my resources, what are their total hours of capacity? And then what is the actual realization against that stuff? And then this is just a really simple one for the working capital and cash flows. Okay, so from that perspective, I'm just showing you these so you can start to think outside the box. What are things that people have asked us for in the past? What could I start to showcase to them, either in, a very much a report format, or in something that's more geared around, just looking at charts and graphs. And then one other one that I did do for one of our customers, right, is I was working on job details. So he was a job shop. And so again, this one's breaking out all of his jobs. And as I were to start looking at this stuff, this one starts to cycle through all the different kinds of jobs for each of the different types. And all this data gets changed based on what I'm clicking here. And it shows me different jobs that were into these different categories. And then if I had all of these turned back on, but I only wanted to look at just this one job, then all of the rest of those jobs get shut down. This was messed up. I added something in here wrong. And so my slicer wasn't working properly against that. But the rest of these were working fine. So that's one thing that we did. And then this one was just a summarization of all of this stuff, right? So if anyone's done any sort of job costing, right? You've got costs and you've got sales, and you're trying to see what you've done against these things. This is trying to show us our relationship between our costs and our sales. And then this one over here is showing us our WIP summary for each of the jobs. And then one final visualization that we worked on for them was going out here, and I was actually just playing around doing some colors and things as I was talking to him at the time, and I didn't go back and clean that up. I apologize. But here, right, when we're doing job costing, we can buy two particular jobs as we're working on jobs. And so when we're going out there and actually doing purchase orders, right, I could go out here and start to look at purchase orders for a particular job and be able to look at, hey, here's all the items we bought for this job, and here are the quantities that we're waiting to receive in against these jobs, so that we know, hey, I'm still waiting for this one to show up before we can go ahead and start this job up. So lots of cool things that you can do with it. And with that, I just want to thank you all for attending. I hope you found this interesting. Sorry, I had a little hiccup at the beginning there, but we did get it back on track. But this is a really cool tool that I think you would enjoy working with. You can start out with the free version just by going into the Microsoft Store and doing the download against the Power BI. And if any of you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to help you, whether it's from a GP perspective. I can be honest with you about the Intact side of it. I believe we'd have to kind of leverage a intermediate tool to be able to pull some of the data directly into Power. There's not a direct connection into Intact, I guess is what I'm saying. There are many direct connections to different things. Intact isn't one of them yet. And so we have a tool that would allow us to be able to pull that data and bring it in for you to be able to play in Power BI. But if you have questions or concerns, and if it's an Intact one, I can certainly hook you up with Wes or Mike to be able to answer it better than I could. But thank you everybody for attending, and I appreciate your time today.
Do you have a quick start sheet on getting started with Power BI?
So I don't have a sheet, but truthfully, if I go back through my spread or my PowerPoint here, which you can download, it starts us with the get data, right? Where you would want to click on the get data button right there. And then it shows you the different data sources, and we were focused on the D365, so that's the one I'm focused on right here is Business Central. But you can see that there's a whole lot of others. It just doesn't happen to have one for Intact. And then as you come in here, you would select your company from production or sandbox. So you would probably want to do it against your production company. And then it's just about selecting the different tables that are available to you and being able to review that stuff. So this, I did do this screenshotting to kind of walk you through that. Click the close and apply here. Apply your data in here. It's just letting you know it's creating it and it's going to add it out into the fields. So I did this to try to remind you of the things that we walked through here. So it's not really a shortened version of it. It's, you can see how many slides it goes, but to go out here and truthfully, here's where I wanted you to remember is just go out there and play and try different things and see undo is your buddy. If you make a mistake, hit the undo button and go back and fix it. But play. Click on, bring out a couple pieces of data and just try the different visualizations and play around with it. It's really easy to function with and play around with and have a bit of fun with. Super. Thanks for attending. We really appreciate it.